No, it's a pleasure to be here. I wasn't sure when you asked me to come on this topic, right? I wasn't sure whether to be whether to take it as a compliment or to take it as like, oh, I'm now old enough, you know, that I'm a
That's the
topic
one
of,
thing. That's the one thing during our conversation thus far is my conversation with other people too. So age doesn't prove the guarantee wisdom, right? So wisdom can
absolutely.
come at anybody at any stage of the life. It's just like how you be able to articulate that, how you be able to take the best out of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that's a key. I think that's a key insight is that, wisdom is a very different thing, right? And age, what I've seen with age is that it seems to be a sliding scale. It's very relative,
Mm.
right? Because one thing that's happened to me, like when I was younger, I thought that somebody that was over 50 was old. But now that I'm over 50, I haven't become old yet. You know,
You remember?
so more and more people become, in my mind, more and more people become young or become kids in my mind, but I've never become old yet. And I think it's the same for my parents, right? They don't really see themselves as old yet, even though they're in their 80s. So I think age is something very subjective. There's certain inevitabilities, right? There's certain things that change for everyone. But I think if you look at the number, the number of candles on your birthday cake or whatever, and then you project how you should be, right? That's a dangerous thing, right? I think more being right where you are, and using whatever your life has given you, is a better approach, for me, right? So I think age is a very relative kind of thing, and you brought up wisdom. Wisdom is wisdom. I think is even more elusive. I forget who said it, but I think you can find the same thing in a number of different cultures or philosophies. I think the wisdom is not knowledge.
Mm.
Many times I think people, especially younger people, collect information and knowledge, and that's important. But it's not the same thing as wisdom. Wisdom is when you get to a stage of your life of realizing just how little you know.
Yeah. Wow.
That's when you can be more open, I think, to kind of the wonder of life and the mysteries of life, is when you kind of achieve that level of humility, I guess it is, that I may think I know, or I may have some information, but I never really have the whole picture.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can feel kind of scary, a little bit, can make people feel untethered, like no, I need to know, if people have a need to know, but actually not knowing is very liberating.
Mm.
When I don't know, right, then I'm open to get new information. I'm open to learn something. If I think I know, the moment I think I know, like I'm done. The conversation's over. I'm not going to learn anything. And I think that as you get a little bit older, life has a way of I guess giving you that humility. Eventually, I think everyone eventually has these opportunities, to gain a little bit more humility and wisdom. But the problem is they tend to be very painful experiences.
And that is why this conversation matters. Okay, because if we can help them to realize it early, you look at it, if a manager can have, can experience it early, or a leader or a husband or a wife, how well they could bring back into the workplace, to home, to the relationship, how beautiful they can create, right? Instead of, if they know it late, then maybe they have to use the time, the upcoming months, upcoming years to fix the problem they already created in the past. So the earlier that we can help, we can share, the earlier that, I think that we can contribute something in there. And thanks for sharing that that not knowing is actually liberating, because in the world right now, people always striving for knowledge, striving for information, trying to know, and it's uneasy to be not knowing. Right?
Yeah, and you don't have to look very far to see the folly of knowing, right? So I can remember just 10 years ago, right? So I'm not a physicist or anything like that. I don't pretend to know these things, but I read articles and I try to see what does science say about the universe, right? And just 10 years ago, right, the smartest people in the world had theories about why the universe works the way it works. They had these unified theories and reasons why, the universe, the Big Bang happened and what happened after that, and all. They have, theories and explanations for everything. Well, in just the last 10 years, right, they've all changed, right? Like the smartest people in the world have figured out now that the universe as they know it, what they could see through the telescopes, is only 5% of the mass of the universe. 95% of the universe was completely unknown. It's this dark energy and dark matter that physicists knew nothing about, right? These are the smartest people in the universe, smartest people on the planet. And they were that wrong, right? So what about me? Like, so what does that say about what I know?
Yeah.
There's lots of things that I still fall in this trap a lot of wanting to know or thinking I know. But then I consistently get surprised that, well, my perspective was only one part of the puzzle. It was only one view of many different views on a certain event. So I think that we, our desire to know is a good desire, right? It gives us curiosity. It forces, creates innovation and does a lot of things for our society and for our species. But I think it's both humbling and liberating to know that, we're just one piece of the puzzle. Because, when I think I know, right, then, usually it doesn't turn out well. I'm usually wrong. I usually end up making mistakes or, needing to go back and revise, right, what I thought I knew. And so, I think just realizing that we only know a little is one of the, I think the two wisest things I think a person can say is, I don't know, and I need help.
Need help and I don't know, right? But we're getting back to these 2 points later in this conversation. I want to bring you to the very early of the conversation when you say that wisdom isn't knowledge. Okay? And a lot of people out there misunderstood. So a lot of people on the assumption that knowledge is wisdom. So you have a lot of knowledge, then you are wiser than the other person. So why do we have that mentality?
Um, I think that early on, I think people go through different stages of development.
Mm.
Right? When we're children, we need structure and we need safety. And so we need things to be definitive, right? And when we're learning, right, we need to learn in a certain way to build our, to build our foundation, right? We need to learn things, and those things tend to be facts. Those things tend to be information, right? If you don't have a basis of information, a basis of reality, then it becomes very difficult for you to have, I think, a foundation to see further on, right? To see beyond, right, where you are, right? So I think, I don't think people can make the leap from, from the beginning to wisdom without information in the middle, right? So we all go through a phase, I think, where we're building our, we're building our context for the world. We're building our opinions. We're building our powers of reasoning. We're building our, set of experiences, and those things tend to look like facts and those kinds of things. And then along the way, right, something happens. And I think this experience, to your point, right, I think there's sometimes this experience happens to us, and sometimes people seek this experience and can be able to gain this experience. But we start to realize that insight that I mentioned, that we've been learning all these facts. We've been striving. We've been trying to control, right? Trying to understand. And then finally we realize that we are not in control. We do not actually understand. We may know some things, but we don't fully understand almost anything in our lives. And we certainly don't control anything in our life. Almost everything in our life is out of our control, even though we spend much of our lives trying to control everything around us. And that's what I meant when I said these experiences of gaining wisdom tend to be painful experiences, because they feel like you're losing control. They feel like your life is falling apart, right? So the things that have taught my wife and I humility were things that are things that nobody would wish for. They're things where you do feel completely out of control. Whether it's something happening to your children, losing somebody that you care about, having a health challenge, something hitting you that makes you realize that my life is temporary and that I don't really control almost anything around me other than the way that I react to the things around me. So the things, my journey has not been, I didn't go out and try to acquire wisdom and gain wisdom. I got beat up by the world.
Wow.
and realized that, oh wow, what I thought I knew was only part of the picture, or was wrong. The things that I thought would bring me satisfaction and happiness were false. The things I thought I was controlling and managing were completely out of my control. And life showed me that, right? Sometimes in some very painful ways. But that doesn't mean that that everyone has to go through that same journey. I have met people, I know people who have been able to come to those realizations through a different path. Right? Through seeking, through through maybe they had more natural humility than I do. You know, maybe they had an upbringing, and maybe they had teachings, they had mentors or people in their lives that taught them these things earlier on. But I think that everyone has to go through that transition of being focused on knowledge and things and control, right? They have to go through a phase of that to build their base, but then they have to move to the next phase. At some point, they have to move to the next phase, and they're either going to do it themselves, like try to get there themselves, or life is going to do it to them.
Yeah. So you said it's going to be painful, right? And because of things starting to fall out of our control, and a normal person, when things starting to get out of their control, they would try to put the energy, the efforts to regain the control, and is there a way that we can help, you know, like people to see that, okay, that's maybe a sign for them to let it go and experience, instead of trying to fight the current and to regain the control?
You know, I think it helps to have examples in you know, in your life. You know, and I think that's a lot what people who are older, the service that they can do for people who are younger is to help them to see that they don't have to continue to suffer. They don't have to continue to try to get control. Right. So I think that it's helpful for people to, you know, have people in their lives that try to teach them these things. You know, I think many spiritual traditions or religions are trying to teach people these things. But it still comes down to an individual decision. You can't make someone realize that. If they want control and they want to continue to fight for control, they will continue to fight for control, and they will continue to suffer. So I think, you know, whether it's a single event or a culmination of many different events, eventually people need to surrender. They have to wave the white flag. They have to say, I have tried to control this and it doesn't work anymore. They have to. I think there's an element of surrender that everyone has to come to. And it, like I said, it may not be a single event, right, where they say, oh, I now realize I'm powerless over these things. It may come over the course of years, but I think eventually people have to come to their own decision that this path of mine of trying to control everything around me is not working, and it's not bringing me happiness or joy. It's only bringing suffering to me and people around me.
Which means that they need to have really good mental preparation when they get into that stage. Otherwise, they will be very surprising, because the world starting falling apart a lot, you know, from what they know to what they're experiencing at the moment, right? So what is steps that you think that we need to prepare mentally?
Steps that we need to prepare. That's a good question. I don't know if I know. You know, just thinking about my own children as examples, right? So far, my efforts to try to prepare or to help them, have mixed results, right? So I think that I think the world is very noisy, right? Yeah. The world is always demanding. The world is, you know, there's all this noise, right? And it is very tough to compete for people's attention in the world, right? But a path, because the path toward wisdom, or I think toward accepting that we're not in control, is a quieter path. It's not calling to you, right? The world that says that you need more, and that you're not enough, and that you need to get more knowledge, and that you need to get more money, and that you need to do, the world is screaming all the time in very noisy ways at people to continue to stay on the path that they're on. Continue to get more stuff, continue to strive for success, worldly success, continue to do all these things that we're already doing, right? And I think that perhaps one thing that we could do to prepare people would be to question as societies, to question the culture we're building, right? So are we creating a system in which people can really thrive and walk their own path, right? Because I think when I look at young people, my kids, even myself, like the world is screaming for my attention 24/7. Like, I've got social media, people out there telling me how great things are, and how I should live, and how I should look, and how I should, all these kinds of things. That is a very difficult environment in which to walk this quieter, simpler path, I think.
There's two things that I noted here. One is talk to the older people. So it's generational and wisdom to transfer. And I saw it happen in a lot of countries, a lot of cultures, that we have a gap between younger generation to talk to elder people. Because you don't know what we do, and then the other side will say, "Oh, we've been done that. We don't know. You don't know what you're saying." So those differences becoming, create the gap bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until one day it's hard for them to sit together to share. So let alone listening and thinking, right? So sharing is already challenging. So what can we do, John, to let one generation to be more opening to listen to the elder generation, or having the elder generation to be more willingly to share to the younger generations their life experience and wisdom?
Yeah, that's I think that's every generation faces that same challenge. I think I think there's everybody goes through their own life experience, and I think the tendency, and I've had to catch myself on this a number of times, right? The tendency is to look backward at younger generations and to look down a little bit. Like, oh, they didn't experience the same things I did. They didn't have to, maybe they didn't pay their dues, or maybe they didn't, they somehow had an easier life, or they, whatever. We tell ourselves all these stories, right? And I think, I remember my grandparents looking at me the same way, right? That I didn't know what the Great Depression was like. I had never known, and this is true, like I had never known what it's like to not have enough to eat. So I think there's a tendency always to look for the differences between us and anyone else, whether we're talking about age, culture, upbringing, whatever, right? So, I think it comes from, it's an individual question, that, what is it that is stopping me from being open to hearing, the experiences of this other person.
Mm.
And I think you asked the question. You said, how can we get older people and younger people to listen to one another better? The first thing I would say is that age does not necessarily imply wisdom.
Mm.
I think there are lots of old people that I've met that I don't want to listen to.
Mm.
Like, frankly, they're bitter, angry. They're bitter, angry people that are still in the mode of trying to control or grieving the loss of things, of things in their life. And there are lessons to learn from that. But I think it's a bit dangerous to say that younger people should learn wisdom from older people.
Selectively, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes what younger people should learn is from older people is that's not the way to live. Is to maybe learn from their mistakes. But I don't know how to make that happen. But I know that I wonder. So I guess this is a question maybe to you. Here in the U.S., as families age, we tend to get more separated, right? So our parents, when they get old and they can't take care of themselves anymore, they go into nursing homes or hospitals. They don't live with the younger generations. The younger generations see less and less of older people over time. Whereas there are other cultures, many cultures in Asia, India, right, where the families are integrated across generations. They live together or live in closer proximity to one another. I think which may lead to more understanding of between the generations. I don't know. I wonder what your observation is.
I think it's yes and no. So of course, it's really up to the people how open they are to listen to, right? And then they're up to, like sometimes I have friends who live in the families that their grandparents and their parents always fighting for ideas, fighting for who's right or wrong. So they didn't want to listen to any of them. All they wanted when they're young age is trying to get out of the house, right?
Yeah.
And because of the culture, tie them back. When you get out, they say, okay, you cannot. You have to go back, and they're not living happily themselves. And sometimes separation may be a better idea. And I see the trend of separation like this happening a lot more in Asia, in my country specifically. And for a good part of that also, John, because if look at us, if we go to work, 8-10 hours a day and have so many things, like outside of work, we are not professionally to take care for the other people when it comes to like really need to have medical attentions, right?
Yeah.
So giving it to somebody that really well equipped and then well trained, certified to do it is the right thing to do. So people have to juggle, between the culture and what's right. All right. And I see a lot of American friends now starting to ask their children to move back. It's amazing. They say, okay, they're starting to get older and they say, okay, I saw my son, my daughter out there struggling with the world, struggling with here and there. Why don't you move back so you don't have to worry about mortgage, you don't have to worry about it, and then you find a job in the area, you have a house taken care. It's nice, and I see a lot of that happen in in my in the community of people I spend time with. So that start to shift. The east and the west start to shift, and maybe one day come to the balance point. I think the balance is important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear you say that. Even when you live with when you have multi-generational household, that doesn't necessarily change the dynamic, right? If people are still in the mode of trying to be right and convince other people and all that kind of thing, it doesn't really work. And now I have 3 kids that are all adults, right? They're all over 20 years old. And
How old is the youngest?
the youngest is 20. Yeah.
20. So now 2005.
2003.
2003. All righty.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's going to be 20. She'll be 21 in December. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please continue. You say you have 3.
So,
sorry.
So, our tendency as parents, right? What we want is that we see things going on in their life, and we feel like we know how this is going to turn out, and we want to help them, right? We want to tell them, right? Maybe you should think about this, or maybe you should do it differently, or whatever. And our kids don't want to listen to us, right? Yeah. They, because they immediately see those good intentioned, those well-intentioned pieces of advice as judgment, of saying that either you're not smart enough, or I don't respect you enough that you can figure it out on your own, right? It doesn't feel good. It didn't feel good to me. I'm sure it doesn't feel good to them, right? So I think one of the things that I'm striving to do is to give less unsolicited advice, and to have my life be more of my example than my words.
Beautiful.
If my children or anyone else sees what I do and how I act and how I live my life, and they want to know more, they'll ask me. And if they're curious and they ask, then there's a conversation that can be had. But if I see something that they're doing and I decide to give them advice, it's pointless. It's disrespectful in a way. I had someone tell me this. My son was struggling. He was in his late teens, and he was struggling, and I was afraid. And I kept coming in and trying to save him from problems that he was creating. And I had a friend tell me point blank, he said, what did he ever do to you to make you disrespect him so much? I said, what? I said, what? He said, well, what you're doing is disrespectful. As you're not allowing him to make his own decisions and learn his own lessons. So when are you going to allow him to stand on his own 2 feet? That's what respect looks like, right? It doesn't look like trying to baby someone. It doesn't look like trying to be harsh and not love them either, right? It's a balance of respecting them, but still being there, still being supportive, still loving them, and still wishing the best for them, being there to support them when they need it, when they ask for it, but not inserting yourself, disrespecting their ability to navigate life on their own. That changed that hurt. That hurt when he said that.
Yep.
He was right. He was right. I was disrespecting my own son's ability and capabilities to make his own life.
Wow. What's his name?
His name is Kale.
Kale. Kale, you said, how do you say it? How do you spell it?
Cael.
Cael. Alrighty, Kale. Maybe I will send you an email and you introduce me to Kale, because I want to learn from him also. Okay, so
Okay.
you're on the list of the 50 people I wanna interview for the topic of wisdom. He's the one who also make that painful moment for you to really, see and transform yourself too. So he definitely has a lot of things for me in the audience to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, like I learned, in the important ways, I think I learned more from him than he's ever learned from me.
Mm.
Right? From because many of the things that he experienced forced me to learn about myself and to face some of the things that I was doing to create maybe some of the difficulties that he was experiencing. Right. Yeah, no, I'll make the introduction. I'll have to tell you right now. Good luck getting a hold of him. He's not very responsive to to
Go
text.
back, yeah, go back to the to that realizing moment. You can just say, for us to gain wisdom, we have to go through, sometimes we have to go through the painful experience. And I'm sure what he said to you, may hurt you here and there, but through that pain, just give you a new way of thinking, right? So,
Mhm.
what did you do to go through that valley of pains, and get the lessons for you?
Yeah, first was to I think is to accept it, right? To accept it, right? Because the first thing, right? The first instinct is to deny it, right? Is to it's difficult to face, right? So it's to accept that hey, this is true, or it could be true, right? And I think to kind of accept that, you know, also to accept at some level that hey, I can change it, right?
Ah,
But that I need help to change it, because if I already knew the right answer, right, would have already been doing it differently, right? So in a way, what I had to do was to accept that difficult piece of news, and then to ask for help and to say, oh, I'm not doing it right. Like help me do it better,
wow.
right? So if I'm not going to do what I always do, right? If I'm not going to continue in that mode, right? What does better look like? Because I can't just stop. I can't just stop engaging with my son, right? I'm in a relationship with him. I can't just say stop doing that, right? I have to decide what I'm going to do. And
Mm,
to do that, I need help. I need somebody to help me find a different way to be, right?
mm,
And in that case, right? I mean, I think I had good advisors, I had mentors, friends, therapists. At the time, my wife. And we thought about what do we need to change, and how can we do it differently,
mm.
and and then to and then I think and then you start to then fear starts to come in, because if you're trying to do something different, it's change.
Mm,
And then you need to find the way to continue to have the courage to do something different, because it's so easy to fall back into the old habits, right?
mm.
Because the old habits are my old habits were to protect me,
Ah,
right?
wow. Yep.
and and I think that ultimately, right, everything we do that is self-destructive in the moment feels like the right thing to do. It feels good. There's a payoff somewhere, right? But the right answer is usually the harder answer. It's the one that is somehow suppressing my natural ego, my natural desire to protect myself, right? So you need to have the courage to do it. And I got that through other people, right?
Wow.
I have limited supply of courage. Like, there's a lot of things that I can do, but most of my courage comes from other people. It comes from other people telling me I can do it, or showing me that it can be done. And so I try to do better. And then the other thing is that I have to realize that I've done things, and that there may be damage that I need to repair.
Wow.
And so making amends to my son, like to be able to go back to him and say, you know what, when you were a kid and I was doing these things, that was, that was doing you harm. I thought it was helping you, but it was not. It was doing you harm, and I see that now, and I'm sorry, and that's not what I've strived to be. That's what I do want to respect your ability to make your own decisions. And I do believe that you have the capability to run your own life, right? So I said those things to him, and I
What
don't
did
know.
you say back?
I don't think he said anything back. I don't think, he was. I don't know. I can tell you that I didn't do those. I didn't say that for him. I said it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I needed to forgive myself. I needed to be able to, in order for me to change, I needed to be able to let go of guilt. I needed to be able to let go of that. And whether he, how he processed that, I don't know. I mean, we've had conversations after that where I think he, the important thing is that I change. I stopped doing what I was doing, right? That I somehow start treating him differently, and that I somehow move past that. That's the only thing that matters, right? My words don't matter very much to him, or to anyone else, right?
Yeah.
It's my actions matter more, right? And now, I think in so many areas of my life, like I'm always seeing where my words don't always match up with my actions, and and sometimes I see it. Sometimes other people point it out to me. My wife is great for that. My wife points out, like she sees me better than anyone, and that can sometimes hurt. But that's life. I'm human. I'm continue to make mistakes. I continue to fall in the same traps that I've always fallen in. All I can do is work on, seeing the pattern better, getting a little bit more skillful at getting out of it. Right.
Yeah, having people, like you say, come into your life also help, right? So the next question, I have two last question for you, because I have another one in 10 minutes.
Okay.
So the next question is, you had your friend as a person who speak up, right? Who speak up and told you about the situation. And that's changed. Now you have your wife also along the way. If sometimes we make mistake, and somebody else remind us about our actions. What could we do to have many more people like that come into our lives to help us?
Well, I think one is being open to those people, because like you don't always know where those people are, or who they are. So being open to new relationships, and I think to follow. Relationships take work. Relationships take an investment. Right? So when you have people who are willing to do that, to nurture those relationships, I think is important. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish I had more people like that. Honestly, I think sometimes one of the things I wish I was better at, I think, was intentionally forming deeper and healthier relationships with people. But, for a variety of reasons, like sometimes I don't, maybe it's fear or insecurity, or, maybe it's just selfishness, man, spend time with myself, or not wanting to invest, or, take the time to build those relationships. Or, sometimes we start relationships and they fall apart for different reasons. And we become, we can become less willing to invest in those relationships. So I think it's maybe just a stance of openness toward life. And sometimes people are going to say things to you and speak into your life, and it's bad advice. It's bad. Like, you don't have to listen to everyone, right? But are you open to hearing people or not? That's the decision I can make. Am I open to having those? Am I open to having relationships? Am I open to having people know me? And am I open to listening to what people have to say? Some people I'll listen to, but I may not act on what they say. Other people I might. I still have to choose, right? Ultimately.
Yeah. Last question, okay, John. It's about what you said about the knowledge and the noise. There's so much noise out there these days that influence our ability to think, right? And on the ways to wisdom, we have to obtain knowledge, then we have to make knowledge into practice, and then along the way, life will teach us the lessons, or we seek out for that lessons. But first, also coming from the ability to think. If we're not thinking clearly, we're not thinking wisely, we're not thinking, differently, then we're not gonna get there, right? So over the years, how have you been nurturing your ability to think, John?
Yeah. You know what? I honestly, I believe that thinking was more the problem than it was a solution. I think what I've come to understand, and I say this especially as a man, that life prepared me pretty well to think. Life did not prepare me very well to feel. And I would say my biggest growth over the last 10 years has been learning more about the spiritual and emotional sides of myself.
Wow.
And because those are the things that society does not prepare men for, in particular. I think I grew up in a household that emotions were generally bad. Showing emotions was tended to be felt as a sign of weakness. And I think I've been emotionally stunted. And I think that's not a whole person, right? It's not a whole person who has a very well-developed brain and can think and reason and logic, but doesn't balance that with feel, doesn't balance that with their heart, right? Or whatever you want to call it, right? But, I think that developing, as a society, I think we put too much emphasis on thinking and the head, and maybe not enough emphasis on how we develop whole people. So how are you connected spiritually? How do you feel? How are you connected to other parts of yourself? I think that's maybe more important than thinking more about what I think. Right? Because one of the things I tell myself and I tell others often is, don't believe everything you think. Right? My brain has caused more problems for me than it's solved, than it's created solutions.
John, you own our audience and now talk about this specific topic only. And I
Right.
think this is critically important because a lot of us are lacking of it. Are really
Mm.
lacking of ability to incorporate feelings into our daily activities and stuff like that. So we grow up not a full person because my time with you is coming to an end already. I will email you separately. Let's see
Okay.
we can schedule another day to just talk about that specific idea. Okay,
Would
is
love
that
it.
okay with you?
Yeah, I would love that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
very much a work in progress, I would say, but
And thanks, John, a lot for spending your morning joining and sharing your stories. See how fast time flies, right?
I
So
know.
I really appreciate a lot of insights in this conversation today, and I look forward to seeing you again for that feeling topic.
That
Okay?
sounds great. Thank you. Enjoy the
Say
rest of
hello
your
to your
day.
family for me, please. Okay?
Yes, do the same for me. Thank you.
Thank you, my
Talk to you
friend.
later. All right.
Talk to you
Bye.
later. Bye bye.